Great. I got my new gavel. Call the meeting to order. I see that we have Pauline, Deborah, Harriet, and myself. So that makes quorum. I'd like to again welcome Viola and Kate for being here tonight, as well as Steve and Mackie. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to let Kate and Viola take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Holly. So what we want to do, and I think I can share my screen. Is that correct?
You should. Yep.
Okay. So I hope everybody's here to talk about Tufts Reconstruction Project. And wanted to start, let's see, oops. The main reason that we're here right now is to get feedback from you. And our usual process these days is that whenever we are at a critical point in a project, we have a public meeting or some public announcement. And after that, we solicit feedback based on what we presented at this public meeting. So we've had the last public meeting was October 11th, and we have been going out onto the street and talk to people. And we also are trying to get feedback from all our committees and commissions. So the Commission for Persons with Disabilities is an important one to us. And what we usually sort of expect, if I might say so, is that people on the commission inform themselves, either participate in the public meeting or go onto the website to check it out. And then we'd love to hear from you. Usually it would be great to get a memo or something like a letter of consensus. I always use the wrong word, my apology. And if the commissioner committees want to, we come and we're here to answer questions or clarify things. So because this is like a special meeting and we have a little more time, what we did is we took the public meeting presentation, shortened it, and kind of summarized and focused on the design. And so with that, I want to go right into describing the project. So I hope everybody knows where Tufts Street is. It's a main artery, I was going to say main street that feeds into Washington. Harriet and Frank, do you have something immediate to say? Hi, Harriet. You're muted.
Thank you so much for having this meeting with us today. And I was fortunate enough to walk with Holly, not once, but twice. And once it was the whole PTAC group and you, and I'm grateful that you were there.
Same here.
And what I wanted just to mention is that Adrian has aided us in sending all the PDFs and descriptions and so forth to the Perkins School for embossing. And that means that, Pauline and I have spent quite a bit of time with your the documents that summarize the everything from the community meetings to the pop-up activities to the results of the surveys. So in some ways, I feel that I'm not totally informed, but I feel like I have some footing with the project, having actually walked on Tufts Street, number one, and also having gone through these documents. And so I appreciate these opportunities. And I have not managed to write to you, Kate, or you. Well, a little bit, I left a message for you, but I meant to put it in writing in an email too, with some of my questions. So maybe we'll address those later, but, I just really wanted to acknowledge Adrian and Holly and your willingness to come and spend time with us, because it is really true. We wish that there were more folks with disabilities here, but somehow the linkage is not very strong in our reaching as many corners of our community as we'd like to. And by our community at the moment, I'm saying people with disabilities who are often very affected, just as cyclists are, and families with children and like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Yeah, it was great to see you on the street and or walk with you on the street and experience or learn.
Yeah, you got some direct experience.
Yes, absolutely.
Adrian, you have your hand raised, and then I have a question also. Please go ahead.
Yeah, couple things. Thank you, Harriet, for saying what you said. With that said, as a reminder, Kat wants to say hi, but that's not why I raised my hand. As a reminder, why Harriet and Pauline did get these materials embossed, it is helpful not only for them, but for everybody, that if there are visuals or pictures, for those to be verbally described. So just keep that in mind. And then as a reminder, anybody who's speaking, just say your name so we know who's speaking and have that audio. And through the chair, as I was just reminded, Brian Postlewaite, who's the secretary, couldn't be here. So you all need to take a moment and find somebody to take notes or minutes of this meeting.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm happy to do it unless someone would really like to.
I can give it a shot.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Frank.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Frank. This is Katie, and I am not in a position to be able to take notes right now. That's just why my camera is off. But I am here and I am participating. So thank you for being here, and thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Glad you're here, Katie. Thank you. Okay, so we've got Frank on the minutes. Back to you.
Okay. So what we see on the screen is the question, what is the project, and a picture of Tough Street. And then the next slide shows the limit of work. It's a map and on the map you see outlined Tough Street. And the one important thing I want to stress is that the project scope includes Cross Street. So you will see intersection improvements across. However, we will not touch Washington as of now. So for Washington, we can have an intersection or crossing improvement across Tufts, parallel to Washington, so to speak, but not anything. At this point, we're not touching anything on Washington itself.
You're allowed to ask questions.
Yeah, maybe I hear you in the background.
This is Hillary.
You're like not.
I'm just, if I just could put one question in, and I may be speaking too quickly or too soon, but I really wanted to find out, considering that once one gets to the corner of Tufts and Washington, if one's aim as a pedestrian, at least, to get to the Green Line station, was there any particular thought? Now I imagine it, it's like, oh, we have to interact with the MBTA, or oh, we have to work out so many things with traffic and so forth and so on. But I just wondered if there had been discussion in the designing process, why Washington Street would have, I'm sure there's cost issues and all the rest of it, but getting to the Green Line station would have been my goal. Do you see what I'm saying? So,
yeah, Harriet, and maybe, as we go through the design, one of the reasons that we're not touching Washington is because there's a project the MBTA is doing, and they're providing the crosswalk across Washington.
in the next millennium, or in the next 5 years, or
no, I mean, I will not hold my hands into the fire, but they are, the design is almost complete and construction should start next year. I mean, we were hoping for this year. I kind of giving up that hope since we're in November now. But we will definitely see that being constructed as far as we know by the MBTA next year.
Viola, excuse me. When you say it's been designed, is that something that's public, what it's going to look like, or?
Not from the MBTA, no.
Okay,
I have a sort of a diagrammatic drawing showing that. So there, we asked if we can publicize that, and they were fine with that.
And that's included in all of the description of the proposed designs. We kind of wrapped that into showing that illustration or the proposed concept.
for the
Okay.
MBTA piece.
Yes.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you both.
So the next slide shows the timeline, and at the top, it describes the 3 phases that usually projects go through. And it's a conceptual design development phase that where ideas are being on a very high level, ideas are being considered. And then from that, we sometimes call that 25%. From there, we go to the final design drawings. And at the end of that, we will have a set that we can share with contractors and get pricing or bidding, as we call it. And then the drawings can be used by the contractor to construct. So it's the pre-construction and bid and construction phase. So we're currently towards the end of the conceptual design development. We started that in July. And we have done a lot of outreach. We've gotten some feedback, and Kate will tell us a little bit about what we've done. And then at the end of August, we had our first public meeting. We took feedback from that, and from all that input and additional design criteria that we briefly will mention here, we came up with this final design that we then on October 11th, the second and last public meeting, or latest public meeting, we introduced the final concept. And we are still soliciting feedback, for example, yours and the other committees. And there's a survey open. Anybody can go online. And the link for anybody is somervillema.gov/Tufts Street. So you will see a survey, and anybody can enter that. And then in December, we will start to look at all the feedback, and then continue to do the final design with the goal to have that be done sometimes the end of winter 24, i.e. February, March. And I mentioned that we've done a lot of outreach and communicated, and Kate will kind of tell us what we've done.
Thanks, Viola. So I'm going to walk us through a variety of the community engagement strategies we use. So, start first with our virtual community meetings. As Viola mentioned, we had our first one in August, on August 30th, and then we just had our second one on October 23rd. We're looking forward to a springtime public or virtual public meeting where we'll share those final designs. We've been able to have 2 different surveys. The first we really did over the summer to understand what are people's transportation safety concerns and learn about priorities for improvements. Following the first public meeting, at that meeting, we described 2 different concept options. They were named meandering opportunities and mid-block moments, really taking in some of that initial feedback we heard about, how do we reduce the amount of speeding on the street? How do we think about making it safer to use the sidewalks? And we did just a 1-question survey on, in these different options, which one do you connect with more? And then we try to promote these in a variety of different ways. So sharing on flyers on the street, connecting with, local community groups, spreading the word, to East Somerville main streets, to sending direct emails and posting on our city social media and communication channels. As I already mentioned, we flyered the neighborhood a couple times, really just to promote the meetings and other opportunities to engage. We really just wanted to connect with neighbors and people who use the street. So if you happen to travel the street on some of those days, you might have seen flyers posted, or also seen me standing on the corner handing out flyers to people next to Viola and Adam. We've been connecting one-on-one with some of the few local businesses that are on the street, as well as our advisory committees. And then we had the opportunity in the summer to do 3 different workshops with the Mayor's Summer Jobs Program Climate Justice team, who really helped us think through what are things that we really want to prioritize for the future, what are some of their ideas, how would it make them feel safer, especially as a young, a student traveling to the high school. And so we sort of pulled all that together, and along with those feedback through our surveys and meetings. We have the opportunity to have a public input map. This is a map online that just allows someone, you could put a point directly in a specific spot. So if you're like, I really want to tell you about the corner of Dell and Tufts Street, maybe it's right by, there's a big, utility pole right there, or I'd really like a crossing across Tufts. You can mark that right on the online map, as well as we had those maps available at our in-person outreach events. In those outreach events, we did what we call our street outreach pop-ups. This is where you might find us at a corner of an intersection, which we did multiple times. First, in that kind of after that first public meeting, we're at this corner of Street and Knowlton Street, really being able to meet people at the end of the day. If some folks are coming home from work, coming home from school, or kind of out in their, just out in their neighborhood, we were able to connect and talk with folks, share information about the project. We also did the same twice at the Capuano Early Childhood Center. So right where pre-K and kindergarten get out in the afternoon, we really want to make sure to connect with parents, and again, kind of big users of the street as they travel Tufts to Glen to get to the school. We also went to a variety of community events, such as the Hispanic Heritage Month celebration, Somerville Community School, as well as the Summer Streets Monster Mash. So really tried to kind of pair a lot of, some virtual or digital options for folks, as well as really trying to meet people if they're traveling through to pick up their kid, or if they're going to go enjoy a kind of community event, really just trying to spread the word and catch as many people as possible. And throughout that, we try and keep regular communications. So if you're interested, we always encourage folks to subscribe to our Mobility Division newsletter. We also have our city newsletter and our different city social media channels. We also always comb all of the 311 comments we get. So if someone's phoned in or if they sent an email, we kind of pull all that together and trying to understand what are the things that people have reached out about their concerns of this street. So really just try to create a variety of options, and I'll just quickly go through, which is also available all in the materials posted with this meeting. There's a full summary of what people shared with us. I will say the major concerns were primarily about crossings and sidewalk, as some folks who experience on the walk that PTAC hosted, there's a lot of deteriorated sidewalk as well as the street pavement, some of that even just being asphalt and not concrete. There's pretty narrow widths, and crossing by Cross Street, and then as you get closer to Dell and Glen, and then Knowlton, and in particular as you get close to Washington Street, there was a lot of concerns shared in all of those, such as, can we give higher, like making more priority for people using the crossings, whether that be raised or just ways to really kind of make sure that folks can see each other if they're using those crosswalks. And then how do we slow a lot of vehicles down? We heard from a lot of neighbors too, just like the high volume of vehicles. And we were able to validate this in some of our data, but we see quite a few folks who kind of travel through Tufts Street, not to enter the East Somerville neighborhood, but to move through it and kind of avoid McGrath. And so that was something that folks share with us a lot. They're like, how do we make this feel more like this is our neighborhood street rather than maybe a street used for cut through? I'm happy to expand upon that, but it's also available all in the materials posted with the meeting this evening.
Thank you, Kate. So with that, we're not quite as showing the designs because in addition to all the public feedback that Kate just mentioned, there are some design considerations that were right there from the beginning. And one is the Tough Street is a neighbor way, is designated as a neighbor way in our newly published bicycle network plan. We published that the spring this year. And what neighbor ways are, they are one of the main bicycle ways or ways to get around, or we envision for people to safely and comfortably get around in the city. So they are walk and bike friendly streets that create low stress experiences on residential streets. They're designed to have fewer cars and slower cars to feel comfortable for all ages and abilities to ride a bike. They are a residential alternative for people riding bicycles. They are without adding bicycle lanes, and they're with minimal parking regulation changes. And for most of our streets, that means minimizing taking parking away or reducing parking. Tufts is a unique case, as you all know. So in this case, there currently are no parking is not allowed, but we are considering, at least for ADA parking, to add that. So in order to create a street and make it a neighbor way, there are national requirements, and we are following that. We will have to make sure that the vehicular speed is less than 20 miles per hour, and that the average daily vehicular volume is less than 2,000 cars. And at peak, we are aiming to have less than 50 cars in peak direction. So we're really trying to make sure that it's not a through street like it is used now, as Kate mentioned, but is only used for bringing people into the neighborhood, either onto Glen Street or for people directly accessing locations on Tough Street. The other main part that we obviously have to make sure is that streets can be accessed by our emergency vehicles. Tufts is again a unique case. It is an important connection for fire engines to come from Broadway and serve the Inner Belt and Brick Bottom neighborhood. So we've worked very closely with our chiefs, the fire chiefs, and trying to make sure that they're comfortable with the design that we're proposing. So the slide shows a map that has the connection from the Rayleigh Brick Central Fire Station that is on Broadway next to Walnut Street. And they usually come down Broadway and then down Cross Street and then turn left onto Tufts to then either turn left or right onto Washington to serve the Inner Belt and Brick Bottom neighborhoods. And then some fire trucks also come from Union Square. They will turn left onto Tufts to then go onto Glen Street to serve the East Somerville neighborhood. Obviously, DPW, our Department of Public Works, trash and snow removal has to be ensured. So we are sharing the plans also with them and trying to make sure that their needs are met. It's especially important for snowplows because they require a certain width, and the DPW has different equipment, so we have to work with them to make sure they can do their job, get rid of snow. And then you might have noticed that the 90 currently goes down Tough Street southbound. So we're also talking with the MBTA. That was kind of news to us that they directed the 90 down Tough Street. And it's currently very low frequency. There's like once an hour a bus goes down there, some hours none, and obviously overnight not. And so we felt like even in the current situation, a neighbor way could let a bus very slowly go down the street. There are no bus stops. And our conversations with the MBTA really directing them to discontinue using Tufts for any bus route. And we're just at the beginning of the conversations, but there was no like, oh my God, we cannot do it. I mean, as you know, they're going through changes and still trying to figure out some of their bus redesign. And I think now we're finally going to the concept designs. So I want to, with the first slide, we're seeing the goals. And I want to emphasize that, like on most of our streets, the first and utmost goal is to increase safety and ensure safety for people walking, riding, people driving, and for emergency access. So what that means is we're aiming for lower speeds, lower number of vehicles, safer crossings, and a clear passage for fire trucks. The other main goal is accessibility, both on our sidewalks, crossings, and to make sure that people can reach destinations. So that means wide enough sidewalks, a smooth pavement, clearly marked crosswalks, and accessible parking. And then there's something that we strive to do. If we can, we will increase the comfort by increasing shade and creating an overall more pleasant environment, usually by adding trees, more planted areas and benches. So with that, what you see on the next slide is our concept plan. And to orient people, this is because it doesn't fit. Tufts is just long enough at this scale to not show it all next to each other. So on the top part on the left, you see Cross Street. That section goes all the way to Glen Street. And then if you continue at the bottom of the slide, it continues, and then you see the end on Washington Street. So if we start with the intersections, so on Cross Street, across Cross and across Tufts, we are proposing raised crosswalks and larger sidewalk areas. We call that curb extensions. And these curb extensions are great to, they narrow down the width of the crossing, but they also give an opportunity to really announce the street with gateway, what we call gateway treatments. And there's a follow-up slide where we can go through that. We will have proposing a raised crosswalk across Dell Street, also a narrowing of the street, and again, shorter crosswalk distances. And then another raised intersection at Glen, again, with some narrowing of Glen Street, so shortening of the crosswalk. And then if we continue, we're proposing a raised crosswalk at Washington Street. And also you see that same larger sidewalk or curb extension with the, again, an opportunity to have some gateway treatments. And it shortens the crosswalk across Washington also. Then in the center, you see one other big way for us, our proposed traffic calming measure is to narrow the road to 12 feet, and that makes it a yield street. And a yield street is something where cars cannot pass without having to wait and find a spot to move aside to let an oncoming car through. It's a very common street type on our residential streets. And in this case, because it gives us a lot more wider sidewalk and options, we are proposing a lot of what we call pullover areas. And those are the areas that you see here in this like red brick pattern. And it doesn't mean it has to be bricks. It's just like a visual at this point. And so in these areas, that is particularly important for the obviously the emergency access, but also for daily use. So there should be plenty of opportunities if you see an oncoming car to get out of your way. And there are different types that you see here indicated with A and B, and one down here with C. And the A, you will see at the beginning at the access points, both at Cross Street and in Washington. And I have some sections on the next slide that is really a widening of the street so that an emergency car can go through and two cars can move to the side. And then what you see as B indicated, that's almost like a parking space, but it's really not for parking. It's to allow people to move aside, but it's only for one car on one side. And then the C is kind of a special treatment, and that's really what there's no detail yet, and we're still struggling a little bit. that is to allow bicycles to connect to the crosswalk that we had just mentioned on Washington Street. And you see also on the plan lots of green trees. All the green trees are new trees. There are 4 trees overall that our urban forestry person, Vanessa Bukili, has indicated as worthwhile to save. The rest, if they can be saved, we will, but it's, according to her, it's also okay. They're not the right species and they're not in very good health. So you see the 4 indicated in orange that we will try to save. And the rest are all new, and a lot of them sit into larger planted areas that you see sort of in a light green indicated. And as I mentioned before, right now there is no parking, so we at a minimum want to make sure that there are 2 ADA parking spaces indicated here. And we place them right now, one between Washington and Glen Street, and one between Glen Street and Cross Street. And we place them on the residential side. And so, which leads me to, say that the 25% is just really, these are the main moves. All the details are still to be figured out. The material is not defined yet. The exact dimension of it is this pullover space, 40 feet long or 60 feet long. All that can be played with. Is it really in the right location? There's a lot of detail, like where are the utility poles? Where are the fire hydrants? So all that might shift it, including your feedback. So for the ADA parking spaces, for example, if you prefer to have them both in one block, or you'd like one on the residential side, and the residential side in my mind is the one that is facing the neighborhood and not along the railroad corridor. Oops.
Can we go back to that slide, if you wouldn't mind? I had a question, but I see Frank and Harriet do also.
Harry.
Oh, yeah. Well, just keep mine in mind, but I think we should go to yours, Holly. It was just, there's 2 questions I have, which is prior to the construction of the Green Line station, there was parking allowed on Tufts Street. And in talking to community members around there, they have sorely missed the parking. Plus new people moving in, it's been very problematic for the longtime residents. So that's one thought I have. And the other thought I have is there a lot of data that says in narrowing the streets, are we actually creating a circumstance which is going to create more accidents? Anyway, just it not to be answered, but mostly to be considered, that parking is at a high premium. And we've already seen how it turned out at the library. Pretty much all the parking was taken away. And that's kind of a disaster. That's like saying, oh, we all either can ride bikes or we're all on public transportation or whatever. And I find that interesting. So it's just to be considered. That's all. Holly, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, and I had a question too about, are neighborways a federal designation?
I think
No.
no.
No, sorry, go ahead, Frank.
Oh, okay. In that case, if they're not, I guess, but nonetheless, it sounds like the criteria for neighborways are federal in some way. Is that the case?
No, there's a national organization for transportation officials, and they publish design manuals, and their urban design guide, I believe, talks about streets that neighborways are called different in different communities. Like sometimes they're called bicycle boulevards or bicycle street. And so they published these guidelines for streets, and they looked especially for not people just that are like the bicycle racers, so to speak, but really people of all ages and abilities. Like what makes it a comfortable street for somebody with a kid or somebody who's not such an experienced bicycle rider to be in the middle of the road and not on a separate bicycle facility.
Ah, okay.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? Members or guests?
I was just surprised when I first read about, this is Harriet, narrowing the streets. I didn't hear it that way. I heard it narrowing the crosswalks. And I thought it meant the crosswalk itself instead of meaning you are making the street skinnier. I think that's what's meant by narrowing the
Meaning the
crosswalk.
vehicular, or you mean,
Yes.
meaning the vehicular traffic part of the street is now going to be narrower.
Is that right?
Yes, it's both, Harriet. So by narrowing the crosswalk, it's obviously also across Dell Street and across Glen Street. So those will be narrowed to shorten the distance. And then along Tough Street, the whole roadway for the vehicular traffic will be narrowed to 12 feet.
But on those side streets, you're saying, I'm confused. You're saying that it's different from the narrowing of Tufts Street?
Yes, on the side streets, we're not changing the side street itself. So along the side streets, those crosswalks will just have curb extensions or wider sidewalks. So that will just be at the corner of that side street.
Do you mean like Dell Street as
Yes,
an example?
Bell and Glen and Milton too.
Adrian, oh, sorry, pardon me. Harriet, we parked on Dell Street.
I
and we took our
remember.
first
Yeah.
walk, and you said that you're narrowing the entrance into Dell Street.
Yeah, you see that here. So in this, there's a wider sidewalk here.
That's a two-way street still?
Or no, Dell Street is a one-way.
Maybe it was just the GLX truck that was coming up the wrong way, and turning when I parked
Entirely
there.
possible, but you
Yeah,
know,
okay.
it's
That was
yeah,
my
both
question.
both Glen and Dell's are one way away from Tough Street.
And
One
when
thing
you, no, go ahead.
This is Kate. One thing I will add is that where Phil is describing that we're going to add more to those sidewalks, like widen them out, where it narrows the crosswalk, but what it often does too is it prevents someone from parking right onto the crosswalk because there's concrete preventing them from doing that. So what it often means is that someone can stand kind of closer to the start of the crosswalk and someone driving would be able to better see them. So it's another kind of benefit of a curb extension along with shortening the distance of the crossing itself.
Thanks, Kate. This is Holly again. It's so nice to see the additional crosswalks that weren't there before. Looks like there's 4 new ones, Harriet.
Oh, that
4,
would be good.
yes. When you say 9 feet, does 9 feet of sidewalk include places where trees will be planted, where there might be benches or other fixtures?
Yes.
When
So
there
this-
is a fixture, what will you maintain? Will it be 6 feet?
So on a 9-foot, we're trying to make sure that 9 feet is the minimum sidewalk width, if we can make that. And it will be 3 to 4 feet of a what we call the street furniture zone, which is planting and benches and trees. And then 6 or 5 to 6 feet minimum width for the walkable area.
Where would a bike, oh, there won't be a bike lane, that's right. Because
Correct.
it's neighborhood street, okay.
Yeah. And in many areas, which is the beauty of the narrowing of the roadway, we will have much more space. I mean, we might in some cases have up to 19 feet of a sidewalk width, if we're lucky.
And I think, Holly, again, you know my feelings on anything raised, how highly dangerous they are, especially when you're a white cane user and you can't find an edge. Harriet or
Yeah.
Pauline might want to add to that conversation. But, and meandering means the street meanders, right? Not the sidewalk. There's still a straight.
Yeah, you can, obviously the sidewalk is straight along the property line, but then because of the width of the sidewalk changing, it will have a meandering or a curvy curb line. Because sometimes it will be the 9-foot minimum we just described, and in some cases it might go all the way to 19 feet.
I just like, this is Harriet. I just like to make one last comment about the raised crosswalks. So for example, if I were to be living in that neighborhood, I would actually arc my cane tip so that I would find the curb to the, if, let's say if I'm going down Tough Street toward Washington Street, I would slide my cane, arc it around till I could find the actual curb and then slide it back to feel the raised sidewalk, because then I would be clearer that I might actually be on the crosswalk. Unless we actually, my suggestion is taken that we use more of the textural safety panels
In the direction of travel.
in the direction of travel, and then a short span without the panels, and then right as you step into the street, more panels, one more row of panels. So that's just my personal experience with that. Otherwise, for my own safety, I may not walk in the crosswalk. I may have to walk adjacent to it on the Glen Street side or the Dell Street side. I've had to do it for years here at Buena Vista because of the apex curves. So just a thought.
Yeah, I definitely, in that next phase where we will be dealing with exactly that design level, I would love to have a further conversation, because
Great.
obviously there is like the visibility challenge, but then also the mobility challenge, i.e. with wheelchairs. And I always assumed that might be easier on a raised crosswalk because they do not have to go up and down, obviously.
Oh,
So,
I think so, for walkers and for and wheelchairs, yeah.
yeah. So I'm hoping that we can achieve some tactile way that you don't have to go, that you can use the raised crosswalks and feel safe along them.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be a resource. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to the next slide, and we can always go back to this one. And so I wanted to mention those pullovers, or describe a little bit the pullovers that I have already mentioned. So those are the areas where cars can move out of the way to let an ongoing either fire truck or other car pass. And so at the entrances, both at Washington and Tufts, Washington and Cross, we have a 12-foot roadway, and then on each side of the roadway will be these 5.5 wide areas for cars to pull aside, and then next to it, the sidewalk. And what that allows you, and you see that on the slide, there is one section or view where you see, which looks like a bus. That was the only thing available, indicating a fire truck or a larger vehicle, and just by itself. And then the next image shows that same large vehicle and 2 cars being able to fit next to it with the 12-foot wide roadway and the 5.5 on each side of these pullover areas. And then there is an example, a visual example that shows a concrete, at least pavers or something, sidewalk, and then smaller brick pavers for these pullover areas, and then a small curb, and the cars kind of, in this case, is halfway on it, just like we are envisioning on these pullover areas at the entrances. So they're not supposed to be for parking, but really just for cars moving aside. And while the visuals show pavers, which is, I could only find European examples, and pavers are much more prevalent there, I do want to say that we are fully aware we're not planning to use pavers, but I think, Holly, you had mentioned that already in your feedback. to use like scored concrete or even maybe scored asphalt. The idea, and you see that on the treatment B, where they are truly 8-foot wide pullovers just for one car, and the car is expected to go fully into that pullover area. And then you have the 12-foot next to it for the cars or fire truck to pass. Again, the image shows, you know, sort of cobbly stones for these pullover areas. The idea behind that is that like you see at Tufts today, where there's no parked cars, it's just as soon as there are no cars or the volume goes down, cars tend to speed. So what this really tries to do is if there's only one car going down Tufts, it should look like it has 12 feet to go on and not 20 or 24, and therefore is going to race down the street. So the idea behind these pullover areas looking in these images like an extension of the sidewalk. So the moment you don't have lots of cars on the street, these areas look like they belong to pedestrians and not to cars. So that is what we're trying to achieve, which is a much more pedestrian friendly and prioritized street. And it visually indicates to cars that that is the case. You are not the king of the road, but you should pay attention to everything else that's around you. And that is supported by the meandering, that is supported by the yield conditions, so that you have every car driver has to pay attention to oncoming traffic, and the curvy alignment. It's all of those indicators to a vehicle driver to slow down. And in addition, what we've seen on many of our traffic calming, for example, a speed hump, the moment a car has to, or a driver has to pay attention, they're less likely to use that street as a through street, which is our other goal, to reduce your volume. And then treatment C, the bike pullover, was really our first attempt to try to make that connection, and we're already working on modifying that. So I don't really want to go in detail unless somebody has an idea.
This is Harriet, if you can hear me.
Yes.
I just had one question. Do we have other examples in other neighborhoods of this concept of a pullover area with obviously some visual coloration or whatever you decide to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And the other question is, since people who've driven this as a through street, maybe for a decade or two, will there be some interim signage to get the drivers used to it? That's number one. And the other question is, for me as a pedestrian, ideally there will still be a curb, a definite curb, whether it's 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, to let me know before I wander into the pullover lane.
Yeah.
So those are 2 questions.
Yeah. So the first one, we do not have examples of a pullover the way we're suggesting it here in the city. And I don't even know if anywhere else I've seen it to this extent. However, because the yield street condition is very prevalent all around, on all those streets, you do not have designated pullovers, but pretty much every driveway functions as one. So it's either a driveway or a parking space that is not occupied. So it's not anything different, except it's not designed and it's not dedicated.
I see. Okay.
And then for your other, yes, we are totally aware that we either need to indicate to you with some tactile warning that you should not go into the pullover areas, or with a curb. And we haven't, again, that's a design detail that we haven't figured out.
Okay, thank you.
All this is Kate. Viola, there was a question about interim signage to get drivers used to the condition.
Yeah, and we have also started talking about that. And there's a little bit, we're trying to reduce signage and not create the sign clutter, but we might definitely consider that, at least for the interim, until cars are used to this. And like any change, cars will continue to use it at the beginning, and then they will change their behavior because it's not very comfortable for them to go through that street. So we will definitely not see the huge success right away, but over time, volumes and speeds should be reduced.
Viola, I was taking notes and I missed a critical part about how do we designate these pullover areas? You said we will
Yeah,
not.
they will be
cobblestone.
obviously, yeah, visually designated, and then we are considering adding signage too.
Okay, by visually designated, you mean it'll just be color, but it'll be at grade level with the vehicular lane, right? Rather than
Or with a slightly with a mountable curb. You know, in this example on the slide, you see a car parked and the curb is like, I'd say 3 inches maybe. So we're considering a 2 to 3 inch curb to be the highest. So it
okay.
will, yeah, and you know, while we're not suggesting pavers, but with a different colored or a different scoring, they these areas will be indicated. So they will be visually
Okay, we've seen those in Budapest, so yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's a very common treatment in Northern European cities.
This is Holly. I'm just going to interrupt again. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're at almost 7:30. And I just wanted to see if there was any other feedback or questions. I know you have more information to show us. If any of other members like to speak.
This is Deborah. I actually had a question back on the previous slide, which is when you're designating trees to remove, are you taking a look at routes that are disruptive to the sidewalk? I know that that's one of the real problems is when you have those routes that are making it bumpy for mobility concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are lots of them on Tough Street, as
Yes.
anybody who has walked it. Yes. So this is a project that will fully reconstruct the sidewalk. So all existing concrete will be removed and the subgrade too. So yes, all the roads should be removed. And then that is further a reason to remove some of the old trees and all the new trees because we're hoping to have more space for a planting bed. There's less like, you know, the chance of the uprooting should be drastically reduced.
Great,
This is
thank you.
Kate. Viola, if I could add with the planting bed too, many of our trees in our streets have individual tree pits, and in our design, we're proposing to have kind of connected tree beds. So not all of them, but where there's longer places, and that actually allows a little bit more space for the tree roots. And again, if they have space to go, they're, correct me if I'm wrong, Viola, they're less likely to go and disrupt and kind of find other space. And it can sometimes actually be easier for tree health if trees are near each other.
Yes.
Good idea.
Yes. We're learning this in our biodiversity class.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Diana, for the feedback. Anyone else? I'm sorry, Deborah. Oh my gosh. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
It looks like Stephen has his hand up.
Go ahead, Stephen. Love to hear from you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Mackey. I'm with the Somerville Chamber of Commerce. I grew up in Somerville. I remember as an 8-year-old playing on Jake Street on Winter Hill. The automobiles would stop for me and my friends when we were playing wiffle ball or catch or riding our bikes. We were in charge. We owned the streets. I saw all of that changed. I believe that the automobile in a lot of ways ruined the city, ruined cities in America and in the world. And then we have to take that back. The streets are kind of a public commons. And that everybody should have access to, enjoyment of, and safety on the local streets. So this re-examination of how the streets are used in the most densely populated city in New England are very important. And a key part of that is what the Disabilities Commission brings to the dialogue. I hope along the way that the businesses can be part of the dialogue, but I have a couple of questions. Who is the ultimate decision maker on these designs, whatever they are? Who ultimately makes the decision? Are any decision makers on this call?
By virtue of us talking to them, yes, definitely.
Who are the decision makers?
So ultimately, the staff will decide what will be designed, yes.
Will the staff have to bring this to the Traffic Commission?
I don't know, Stephen.
So it's Brian Postlethwaite and Brad Rawson ultimately decide on this Tufts plan?
We collectively as a staff, and that means including DPW and the fire chief.
The DPW and the fire chief are represented on the Traffic Commission.
Correct?
I believe if you check, ultimately, you're gonna have to bring this before the Traffic Commission.
I do not know the loss of the
I
traffic.
believe
commission
so.
yet.
I think one thing that should be determined who ultimately is the decision maker on this. And I don't think you ought to do another thing to amend or to keep what you have so far before you can answer that question publicly. Who is the decision maker on that? On this, number one. Number two is, when will there be a public hearing before the decision maker, whether it's Traffic Commission or you and Brian and Brad? When's the public hearing? When does everybody get an equal chance? Everybody, or in fact, anybody, get a chance to speak directly to the decision makers. So one, identify who the decision makers are. Number two is, let us know when the public hearing before whoever those decision makers will be. When will that public hearing be? So that everybody can bring forth their interests. If you want to do a 3-foot opening on a sidewalk for a gas line, you have to have a public hearing.
So Stephen,
Yes.
I appreciate that feedback, and there are like tons of things that I could and want to say. However, this meeting was particular for persons with disability. And I'd rather have them give us feedback on the design so we can create a design that whatever decision-making process happens can reflect their needs. And I don't want to unless the people with, and unless everybody here in this meeting would like to go down that route. It's just like what we really came prepared for is to talk about the design and make sure that the design reflects
I appreciate that, and thank you very much, but I think that people with disabilities deserve to speak directly to the decision makers, period.
Thank you, Stephen. This is Holly again. I also grew up in Winter Hill, corner of Oakland Ave and School, and I still live here. And there is no more riding your big wheels up and down the street or playing stickball, which I surely miss. And there certainly were not as many cars as we have now. And I really appreciate that you're here contributing to the meeting and providing some feedback. But I do think we have to pivot and look at a few more of the slides and your input on those designs. If you have like specific things, I hear what you're saying on a much broader level. And I think that I know that mobility will address that. And myself and maybe other members also have interests that are similar to that. Would it be okay if we move forward? Would you stay on with us and still provide additional feedback?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you very much.
Holly, if
Sure.
I may, through the chair, just a point of education logistics. Stephen, just to let you know, Brian Postlethwaite, he couldn't be here this evening. He may join, but he is actually the mayor's appointee to this commission as well. for the very reasons that you state, so that this commission has expertise in engineering and other things in order to have a seat at the table with design and decisions. And my colleagues from Mobility, Viola and Kate, quite often coordinate with this commission on these very things. So I just wanted to note that. And Brian actually just joined us, so I feel like I just manifested that.
Can you tell me how much more of the presentation we have? I want to make sure that we get through your slides.
Yeah, there are only 2 or 3 slides left.
Okay, and I don't want to push you, but it would be okay unless anyone else has any comments or questions on the slides. If we go through the rest, and then we can absolutely circle back to questions, comments, commissioners, public, and make sure everyone has a moment to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is Katie, and please make sure you tell me what that adorable thing with the smiley face is from Portland, Oregon. I'd like you to address
I know.
that. Harriet and Pauline, it looks like I don't know, but it has a smiley face and 3 circles.
It looks like a Lego head.
Oh, it does look like a Lego. It looks like a Lego thing.
Orange and Lego shaped.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's not important, but I mean, I'm curious.
It's a good question, Katie.
Thank you.
Good. So this slide gives some ideas of what these intersections that are identified as gateways could look like. And it's basically some treatment that indicates clearly something different is happening. And we're aiming to have that be then replicated for all the neighborways or in a similar way. So when you drive through the city, you immediately know, oh, this is one of the roads that is dedicated for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. So some ideas would be colorful planters or planters with a certain texture. These planters, we know sometimes are hard to maintain and might not look that lush and green. We feel like even the planter itself with just the sign in it could indicate the gateway, the beginning of a neighborway. We have the example of our current neighborway sign. So on the signage, you would have the name Somerville Neighborway, but also some image indicating it and directionality, some wayfinding with distances for traveling on bike and on foot. And then on these larger curb extensions, we might have to allow the fire truck to move along to mount the curb a little bit. So we would sometimes want to put bollards in there, and you see that currently at the intersection of Gilman and Oliver. We have some bollards protecting the pedestrians for those cars that might have to go onto the sidewalk, the emergency cars. And at Gilman and Oliver, you see those bollards as just like silver utilitarian bollards. And we could do, we could indicate, or we could have fun with those bollards. And the Lego that Katie was just talking about and explaining is one example. The 3 dots are actually light reflection, so they have a function, but the way you put it together, it looks like a Lego. You could also cover the bollards and use them as the wayfinding, or you could just be creative. There's one image where skinnier bollards have tape around them, and that is in Alston, Boston, Alston, an intersection where the neighborhood just took over and one overnight created these colorful bollards. So that's the intersection slide. And then this is the
Ms.
slide.
Holly,
Sorry, go
pardon
ahead.
me. If you would go back on, me, I'm always about nice clear sidewalk, easy crosswalks, wide enough, not too many trees. But I have to say, I really like the pieces, the images that you're sharing here of the variations of the ballards. And I like that they're creative. I like that it adds to the neighborhood. I definitely vote for the Lego. I love the one that shows directional information, although if it also had a way to be audible, kind of like a crosswalk signal is, totally talking outside the world here, but and oh, but where Cross Street and Tufts, those are really fast driving car spots. Are you going to have either signals or those you push a button and it flashes something so people know to slow down before pedestrians are there? Just, I don't know if you're at that level of feedback, but
I mean, that would be a great feedback to give to us. The current design only has a raised crosswalk on Cross Street. And then we already added the speed humps before and after to make sure that we're slower. And
just a
Yeah.
comment.
Thank you. So the next slide shows the intersection of Washington and Tufts. And this is where again, the same gateway treatments I just showed are possible. But this slide also shows overlays the one of the latest iteration that we have for the crosswalk that the MBTA is building, crosswalk and a wider sidewalk that will hold a protected bike lane, but also a waiting area for a bus stop. So you come out of Tough Street, you turn as a pedestrian, you're only a few feet away from the crosswalk that then gets you to the other side, and the other side is what we call a shared sidewalk. So both bicycles and pedestrians will share the sidewalk. It's a wide sidewalk. It's actually wider than the community path, and that leads you directly to the access to East Somerville Station. And this green line here indicates just very vaguely that that's the movement we're struggling with to accommodate for bicyclists. So any feedback you have there is welcome, but the design detail there is still to come. And this crosswalk across Washington is activated by a rapid flashing beacon.
I have a quick question. This is Harriet. When you said the crosswalk at Washington from Tufts, do you mean turning right or turning left across Washington?
If you come out of Tufts, you turn left, and then the crosswalk across Washington is to your right, obviously.
So I guess I'm still pretty profoundly distracted or confused, because if I were a blind person, and I am, I crossed and turned left, but wanted to cross Washington, and I think that's what you're saying, I would have to cross, is it a T intersection? So then after I crossed Washington, I could turn right and be walking up towards the T station. Is that accurate?
Correct, yeah.
But you're saying that after crossing, it's a wider sidewalk, which would be shared by both pedestrians and cyclists, yeah?
Correct.
And is there any, what's the word I want? Is there any standard which would say, like a red stripe, which the bikes have to, stay on, or something to leave 8 or 9 foot wide space for the pedestrian? In other words,
It's
some kind of queuing for the bikes to stay as close to the curb as possible, for example.
yeah, no, it's really like a shared path, just like the community path, where
Well, I can tell you that doesn't work very well with e-bikes, let me tell you. Even bicycles. Because there's no law that says they have to ring a bell or announce themselves. And Frank and I have been walking on the community path here behind my house at Davis Square. There'll be 2 people walking on the right, 2 people towards us on the left, and cyclists will just try to skinny through and do skinny through between us.
At high speed.
At high speed.
yeah.
Instead of just stopping or slowing down or something. So the idea of a shared sidewalk really doesn't seem very, I don't know, you can't do anything else, but I don't know. unless there's more regulations on bike use from the cyclist, it's
Mhm.
like, that's another learning point that we really have to address.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Harriet. And I totally hear you. I think we've all experienced that on the community path already, both as bicyclists, as bicycle riders, and as person walking.
Yeah.
The one advantage I see here is this is a fairly short stretch. And as any bicyclist, you have to turn, do 90-degree turns, which immediately obviously slows you down. So it's already the condition there, because that's the only way that somebody riding a bicycle can leave the community path. So we have not gotten any complaints about that, which doesn't mean that they come, especially as the station gets more use and as we provide more bicycle facilities or bicycle access to it. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the last slide is just talking again about the 2 accessible parking spaces and the pullovers. That's just the general, that is what we are envisioning as the curb use. We did say that, kind of put it out there, if there is more room for additional parking on the curb use, do people, people have then a choice to say you want wider sidewalk with more trees and greenery, or we can use that space for parking. Now, I do want to be honest right now, because we're trying to create a safe street, which means in this case, you do need space for cars to pull over. We try to make that as convenient as possible, as, accommodate sight lines, and also the need for emergency vehicles, that the option to have additional parking are very, very slim. So I don't want to, whitewash this, but if there is an option, please let us know, what you would prefer.
Thank you.
And Viola, if I could add, this is Kate. Harriet, you had mentioned about some of the feedback you had heard from neighbors. The reason why we really wanted to highlight the fire truck routes is that over time has become an incredibly key route for fire. And so that's where there is a little bit of difference from just a few years ago. And that's another, like, as Viola said, a critical consideration of do we fill it up with parked cars that then could block trucks trying to pass through, or really keep that clear.
Yeah. Thank you.
This is Holly. I have a side question. Those new little tiny rotaries, how do emergency vehicles get around those?
Yeah, we've done tests with the fire chief and operators, and so we designed them in particular to allow the emergency routes trucks to go through.
And plows, so probably be that first plow season.
Yeah, the plows was another critical thing, and you see one of the circles being redesigned or shifted a little bit, and that was in particular to accommodate the plows.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask really quick that if we have any commissioners who haven't spoken, shared anything that, compliment the team on things that we really appreciate, and possibly point out areas that could be modified slightly. Pauline, I know you, just checking if you wanted to add anything to the conversation, not to obligate you in any way. Or if any of the other members would like to speak. I just want to say that we really appreciate you giving us this presentation and the opportunity to ask questions. And also, as I mentioned, when this first came up, as residents, it's very important that we go through and complete the surveys and give the feedback. And again, if there are members here or anyone in the public who needs help doing that, or Adrian is here for that, as well as any accessibility issues. I will definitely bring up on our meeting next week, sort of summarize what we've said today and work towards a letter for your plans. And unless anyone else wants to add anything, I would like to open it up again to either Stephen or anyone else who'd like to ask some questions, maybe let Brian acclimate himself to where we are. Thank you, Brian, for coming tonight. I know you had multiple things this evening, and we have had some questions that we're going to ask very politely about sort of how these things go through the cycle from designs to feedback. And I think I don't want to paraphrase incorrectly, Stephen, so if you'd like to add any questions or give any positive feedback or.
Thank you, Holly. I really appreciate you recognizing me, and I thank everybody for taking the time with me. Brian knows, and I think Viola and Kate know that I have real questions about the process that's been going on for a couple of years. I simply put my question in the chat about when the abutters residential and business. And I think this is of interest to the Disability Commission and everybody else as well. If you take a look at that question.
It's interesting, Stephen, when you brought up the feedback from the businesses that are along these routes. That gave me another perspective or shift that I haven't thought of. I appreciate you sharing that with us tonight.
This is Kate. Maybe I'd just like to add is that, we really appreciate the time this evening. We really encourage folks to come to the variety of opportunities. We're really trying to talk a lot to neighbors, to nearby businesses, community groups, to teens who use this route to get to the high school. We've really gotten to know the neighbors along the street and have spent time, sitting in front yards, talking through these items. And so we really encourage folks to come, whether it's through virtual opportunities, if that makes you feel more comfortable in person, or talking more one-on-one with Viola and I, if it's while you wait to pick up your kid outside the school. In addition, we have been talking to the businesses along the street, which are a few, it is primarily residential, and not only on opportunities for the street redesign, but also connecting to resources through our small business division in economic development. And so we really encourage folks, we have today, but Viola and I are always open to questions or opportunities. And really, our next opportunity for our public meeting is in the springtime, where we're excited to pull everything we've heard, pull that together and present the final design and to gather feedback. And so there's lots of opportunities to engage.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak? I just had another question for mobility if anyone else wants to add before we hit our last few minutes. I always like to put out to guests and people who come to present and share with us the same question. What can we do to help you? There's that whole push-pull. You give things to us, but how do we reciprocate back other than giving you feedback in a setting like this? And I am kind of putting you on the spot, but if there's something you want to share, or if you think later on of something that would be helpful for us to be useful, how we can help with your projects. Other than renting out myself and Harriet or anyone else to walk around.
I've already said it. I really appreciated that walk that the PTAC folks organized, and be on the ground with you as users and experience it in different ways and learn from everybody that, we're all different. We all have different needs. And I think that is a tremendous help in just everybody taking the time here to talk to us and challenge us and, push us and pull us and hopefully also listen to us. So that is invaluable to me and to the team. In addition, we have talked about the next steps. There's a lot of design details that need to be figured out. So even upfront, anything you can share, any examples you have where a raised crosswalk worked for you, or you've seen it, and also, you know, consider everybody's different needs. Anything that can help us make decisions on materials or final dimensions or orientation would be appreciated.
Sure. That just reminded me, we've had a few conversations about Davis and some of the raised crosswalks and some of the bricks and some of the things. And I know that Pauline and Harriet had asked to meet with mobility or other department leaders to literally walk and show you what it's like to navigate. And if that's something that, you know, we can try to collaborate with, and that'd be great. And certainly invite Stephen or others who want to participate as businesses to see what it's like also, or maybe that would be a separate thing. But I think it's a really good point that we look at the pedestrians, the automobiles, but also the impact on the businesses within our city.
Yeah, I'm sure, you know, we can arrange something like that.
Thank you for raising that, Holly. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, it's 7:58. We've never been on time. We're not going to end early.
Well, we could a minute early anyway.
Brian, anything you'd like to add?
Unless there's any outstanding questions, I don't have anything to add. As always, Viola and Kate do a wonderful presentation.
Brian, I do have a question. Is Stephen correct in that the Traffic Commission is the final decision maker on whether this project goes or doesn't go?
It is much more complicated than saying there's a final decision maker on anything. Street reconstruction is a very complicated element that requires input from, probably a dozen different departments in the city. And each department has to be coordinated with, consulted. The Traffic Commission is one of those elements. The Traffic Commission has specific roles and responsibilities around specific items with the street, but so does engineering, so does DPW, so does mobility, etc. So there's not so the Traffic Commission isn't a final decision maker, but it is one of the decision makers.
Who is the final decision maker?
The city of Somerville as an organization. There's not, Steve, you were speaking, I think, to an outdated concept of deciding, of making decisions. These decisions are group decisions. We function as a team to develop a final recommendation and design. And part of that design process is going out to the public and to getting outreach, going to all of the various commissions and getting outreach and input.
I would suggest, Brian, you're contradicting the city charter, where the city council has authority over the streets. And the policy approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the 1970s, where the Traffic Commission has authority over regulations of the street. I do not believe the Mobility Division has a decision-making power here. And I'm telling you, I'd rather bring it up here with 10 of us than challenge you in public.
We
but
lost you,
ultimately we'll
Stephen.
do
We
that.
lost you, Stephen. Come back.
Shoot, maybe move to better Wi-Fi or reception.
Yeah, can you move to a different space or?
I don't know where it lost my.
You were saying that you were just saying that the city council also has the traffic commission and the city council, and I'm not sure where you were going for there.
The traffic commission and the city council, I believe, according to the city charter and Massachusetts state law, have policy-making authority over the streets. The city council is more fundamental. The traffic commission is more about regulations. I think the mobility division is going totally over its skis, and it cannot point to things in the city charter or in the state law to give it authority Brian is claiming.
So, Mr. Mackey, you have highlighted 3 components of making decisions on the city. The first is the city council has authority to establish a public way. Traffic commission has the authority to establish various regulations over that public way. And the administration has the authority to execute and reconstruct public ways. And it is our responsibility as the administration, both the engineering division and mobility, to execute those changes following the policies on the public ways that the city council approved. This is the way our city government works.
I think I respect your explanation. I believe you're misinterpreting it, and we will ultimately be found that way, that Somerville is misinterpreting it, that the public way deserves public hearings, that those public hearings should either be before the traffic commission or before the city council or both. That it's not about simply having appointed staff meeting with citizens to prepare their presentation from whatever political background it comes from.
Stephen, I'm just going to interrupt everybody.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Brian. It's 8:03 and we have met my never end early or on time. And I appreciate everyone who's here tonight from the city, from the commission, and as well as you, Stephen. I think this is a broader topic that you're bringing up. I think it absolutely has value. It impacts all of us in the commission. It impacts all people who work in our city. I don't think there's one answer for any of the questions, but I do respect that you've brought all of them up. And I think that I'm not sure how we circle back around these things, but it's probably not within the commission or our meetings. But I will figure out who's the best to respond to you or to follow up to make sure that what you're saying is heard and reviewed, or just giving you a path as a resident. But I do miss stickball. And I do miss the big wheels. And there are definitely, in my opinion, there's a lot of teams within the city that work on these projects. And one thing I can say that's very positive is I don't remember 10, 20 years from now we ever had this kind of public input or sharing of these designs. Maybe that's just because I wasn't paying attention, but I do appreciate that we get to see these, but I also respect your questions around input and decisions. So unless anyone else has any comments, I'd really like to thank everybody here tonight. And wait, where's my key? Brian, you missed my new toy. I have a gavel. Oh, wait, sorry. I have to motion that we adjourn.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good night.
you.